Hello and welcome to The Legal Question, a podcast by Let's Chat Law. I'm your host, Hannah May, a data privacy solicitor based in London.
And I'm your host, Gabrielle, a pupil barrister based in Leeds. In this episode, we'll talk about our motivations into becoming a barrister and a solicitor. We will highlight the differences between the two career choices. And we will also be answering a question from a listener.
In case you haven't heard about Let's Chat Law before, we are a CIC, a community interest company, which provides a safe space for honest conversations about a career in law. And we hope to provide a space for aspiring lawyers to be able to ask not so silly questions about their legal careers and how to get into the industry. Since 2020, we have organised online and in-person events for aspiring lawyers all about commercial awareness, application tips, and also career paths. And we recently, as I said, became a community interest company, and we're launching our website and, of course, our podcast this year. If you'd like to hear more about our journeys and why we started Let's Chat Law, you can listen to the first episode of this podcast series. So, Gabby, today we're talking about barristers versus solicitors. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a fight in a boxing ring. But as you know, and as I'm sure most of our listeners know, unlike in the US where you can just be an attorney, in England and Wales there is a professional split. Would you like to explain what being a barrister involves?
Yes, so I think the main point that everyone will probably be aware of is that barristers wear wigs and gowns. Some people like them, some people don't. I think it's obviously a controversial topic at the moment because some people want to keep them to kind of show the tradition of the career. But then some people think, it's not needed and we are like modernising as a career anyway. I quite like it. I think it's quite nice.
Is it itchy?
No, it's not.
Itchy.
It becomes quite comfortable, but the difficulty is when you take it off, you have like this line here across your forehead where the wig has been. But I think it's all right. And I think when it's cold winter in court, it keeps you nice and toasty.
Yeah, it's sort of a hat.
And when it's warm in summer, it makes you absolutely boiling. And that's probably the most difficult part. But I think that's the obvious, difference. Mm-hmm. Barristers are based mainly in court, but it depends on what legal field you go into. So crime and family, you'd be in court a lot more than you would be if you was, for example, a personal injury barrister that specialised in civil. And then I think we as a whole are known for specialising in advocacy. So like in terms of conferences, but also submission-based advocacy is what we would specialise in. And that means that we then, make submissions in court and maybe like appeal against convictions or sentence, and then we also do like written advocacy, so that might be advices on, for example, private prosecutions or instructing psychologists, for example. So I think that's really important. Another main difference would be self-employment. Mm-hmm. So in general, barristers are self-employed. Some of them are employed by like a business or a company. So for example, the CPS, most barristers are employed and are salary based, whereas barristers in chambers are self-employed. So, you only get paid for the work that you do. And there are, you have to do your own VAT and things like that and have accountants.
Tax returns, so much fun.
Terrifying, but also that's why you get a good accountant, because most barristers are not the best at maths. I know I'm terrible at it. I avoid it like the plague. So an accountant is my recommendation for that problem. And I think you also have to manage your own workload because you're self-employed. You are very reliant on you doing the work. You can't kind of go, oh, well, I'll do it next week, because it's your business, your reputation. And if you are, performing as well as you should be,
Yeah.
there's no one to hold you accountable for it. So you have to hold yourself accountable for your work. And I think that's quite important. And then finally, obviously, clients can instruct you directly, but you have to be trained through, it's like a direct access qualification. So it needs to be approved by the BSB. And that's when clients can instruct you directly. There's a lot of complications in terms of you need to make sure that the client can deal with the solicitor's role, and not kind of, you are not able to do certain things.
Wow,
so
that's
it is
interesting.
interesting.
I didn't know there was direct access, though. That was the thing.
Yes, definitely, but not every barrister, offers that, and it completely depends. But I'm sure on the BSB there's like a set segment on direct access cases, so that's quite interesting. But do you want to kind of compare what a solicitor does? I can't touch on that. I know nothing.
Well, I mean, you were a paralegal for a year, so you had some good experience. I guess with the barrister versus solicitor split, I guess, everything that Gabby just said, often it's the opposite for being a solicitor. So I think that the main thing is, well, firstly, to flag, it's not like Suits as much as we'd like to pretend we're all Meghan Markle or Harvey Specter. It's very much often a desk-based job, so you're providing legal advice to a client, you're doing kind of the background work, for example, drafting documents, like corresponding with the client and so on. Some solicitors can take the higher rights, I think certification, and become solicitor advocates, but often you're the one that is supporting the barrister in court if you get to that stage, if you're maybe in a contentious practice area. And also, I guess one of the key differences is that you're usually employed by a law firm or a company, where opposed to barristers being self-employed. So you kind of get, I guess it swings and roundabouts, but for a lot of solicitors, they want the stability and the structure of, a law firm and having an employer. And the other thing is clients are often in-house legal counsel. Maybe if you're in employment law, they're HR, from the HR department, or they can be, members of the public, as you touched upon with direct access. So, for example, at smaller firms or high street firms, you could get members of the public just walking into your law firm office and saying, "I'd like to instruct you," that kind of thing. So it's, people, normal kind of non-lawyers usually. And I think, the other thing to note is, it's very desk-based work. I'd say, I don't want to diminish what solicitors do, but it's very much like the behind-the-scenes kind of background stuff that you wouldn't normally think, and I feel like what the media doesn't really portray. So you're doing a lot less standing up in court, which suits me a bit more.
I think they work well together as well, and what you realise is, like barristers and solicitors, they work closely together, because solicitors are the ones that instruct barristers in general. So like barristers only get their work from solicitors instructing them. So they do work closely together, and that relationship's really important, especially in crime and family. Without them relationships, you don't get any work, and you don't have, the good work, and things aren't prepared properly because you don't have that working relationship. So I think that's important as well to know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So I think we've touched on this in previous episodes. Definitely go check them out. But Gabby, you always knew you wanted to be a barrister, even from a young age. Like, why?
Well, I could probably split it into personal and professional reasons. I was involved in like the family justice system at a young age, and decided that I was really interested in law. Like the legal system can make such a difference in people's lives, both negatively and positively. For me, it was a positive change, and I found law really interesting, and as time went on, I went in and studied law at college, and continued to pursue it. So that was my personal reason. I did my first ever mini pupillage at 17, and realised that was definitely the career I wanted to go down. I obviously like talking a lot, as you can probably tell, so maybe that's the reason. And I just knew it was the right job for me, because it's advocacy focused, which I enjoy, and I like to be kind of in charge of my own workload, other than like, for example, relying on other people for doing the work. I like to manage it myself and make sure that no matter what, it's done, and it's done to my standards. So that's why I picked being a barrister. Why did you pick being a solicitor?
Well, I have to be honest, I think most solicitors do this, where you have, a week or so period where you're like, maybe I could be a barrister. And then I quickly realised that probably wasn't the one for me. I mean, I don't mind public speaking, but you just get a gut feeling, and I just knew being a barrister probably wasn't the right one. And like, that's also why I'm in a kind of a more advisory compliance area, transactional area of law, rather than a contentious area of law. It just wasn't the one. But I think I found out, like, my calling, I guess, my vocation, because through trial and error. So I did a lot of like internships and work experience to even get to deciding that legal career was for me. And then I managed to get some work experience at law firms, and obviously through university, like a little bit of mooting and public speaking and like client interviewing and things like that. And I managed to, it kind of just made more sense the more I got through my GDL and so on. I was like, okay, probably a solicitor. I also think from a personal experience, like personal point of view, I know my strengths in terms of my strengths in the workplace. And I think, I'm a very visual person, and I think that standing up in front of a judge just doesn't fill me. It fills me with dread, actually, I'm going to be honest. I'm very much more like, like kind of doing all the, I mean, obviously barristers do this as well, but, doing all the background reading and research and prepping everything, and going through the minutiae of whatever, advising the clients. But I think actually getting to my point, it is working with the clients directly. And I think because I did business at my undergrad, I think, and also when I was working in Hong Kong, I feel like that really was helpful, because it kind of showed me that I actually like kind of the commercial law side of things, but I like advising businesses and like finding solutions to their problems. Whereas being a barrister felt very adversarial and a bit scary, I'm going to be honest.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I am also terrified about standing in front of judges and making submissions. And actually, like, when I've asked people, do the nerves ever go away? Because the nerves are here, present.
Yeah.
I'm obviously terrified. I'm sure when I'm on my feet, I'll feel a lot better.
Yeah.
But because I'm a week before, you start to get maybe a bit more nervous and start questioning whether, when you're going to stand up and make submissions, whether anything will actually come out of my mouth, or I'm just going to stand there in silence. But I get told that actually, the butterflies or the nerves will never go away. And once they do, like, that's when you know that you're not right for the job anymore. Because the nerves make you a better barrister, because they keep you on your toes, and it shows that you actually care about the outcome, you care about what you're doing. And they say that once they go away, you've given up, you don't care about it anymore. So even the best barristers will still be nervous.
Yeah, no, that's reassuring. And obviously you mentioned that at the time of recording, you're about to start your second six as a pupil barrister. So what will you be doing, like, on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so at the moment, obviously, I've just seen for my first six, so I finish in a week's time and start my second six. One thing that I like about being a barrister is every day is completely different, and I know that's
such
a typical
cliche,
typical.
But I'm going to say the same thing if you ask me what a solicitor is. Yeah,
it's the typical stereotypical answer. Not every day is the same. However, I can probably give you an overview of what a week would look like. So obviously the court day, in reality, you need to be in court for about 9 o'clock if you've got a hearing for 10, but the court will really run from 10 till 4:30. It completely depends, but you can do, hearings during the day. You might have trials, you might have PTPHs, which are pre-trial preparation hearings. So it completely depends, but one day you might have, a week of trials, and you're in one courtroom for the full week, and you're doing 9 till 4:30 every day. And then you're preparing on an evening and whatever else, and then the next week you might have just a few PTPHs, and you might, have many hours off and have a lot of preparation time. So it completely depends. And I know that's not helpful for people listening, but the excitement really is that you just never know what you'll get. And you're able to kind of have a range constantly, and have a range of cases, and it's not just the same thing day in and day out, which is useful. But it is advocacy. You are having conferences with clients, you're having conferences with solicitors, and then you're also going into court and making submissions and applications. So I think that's what's helpful and interesting about the job. You obviously said every day is different for you. So what is it like?
It is a cliche, and we always use it, I think, in both barristers and solicitors when trying to describe our jobs, but it really does depend. I think for me, the practice area that I've qualified into, data privacy, what I enjoy about it is that it's quite spread out in terms of I do some contentious work, transactional and advisory, but kind of my bread and butter is kind of advisory and transactional in my current law firm. So yeah, it really depends. God, yeah. I'm such a cliche. So yeah, it also can obviously depend when you're a trainee solicitor to kind of when you're qualifying and you kind of progress through the ranks and seniority, because your job will evolve, and as you get more senior, you'll do more business development, trying to like win more clients and do more client management and maintaining the relationship. But at the junior end, it is a lot of kind of the technical stuff, so legal research, drafting documents, communicating with the client. At my law firm, we do a lot of corporate support work because we have a really big corporate practice, and data privacy is one of the key areas that they want to look into. And clients, obviously, nowadays, because of the fines from GDPR, want to be aware of any risks that they might acquire when buying a company. And obviously, you can, as I mentioned with client communication, you might have client meetings and so on. So it really depends, but it's really varied. I think that with being a solicitor and being a trainee solicitor as well, the awkward thing, again, as we've touched on, is you don't necessarily have a lot of control over your time and what happens, but that can be the exciting thing, because you're going to work with like a to-do list in your head, and then by 12 o'clock that to-do list is being completely put in the bin, and then you've got like a whole new set of tasks and stuff like that to do. Probably slightly more predictable maybe than being a barrister, because you don't know what's going to be thrown at you at court that day. But sometimes you'll get a call from a client or an email from your boss, and that'll be like, you need to drop everything and do this, and you're like, okay, cool. So it really does depend. I also think one of the things that I also enjoy is that at my firm we do a lot of DEI work, so we have pro bono charity work and stuff like that, so we can get involved at my firm with those kinds of activities as well.
Yeah, and I think that also depends on the person, doesn't it? So it depends on like what you want to get involved in as well. So, a day-to-day will look different for every individual, because it might be what you're interested in. Like, you might want to go to events that are related to, the legal profession, or you might want to attend, webinars that talk about DEI or certain things.
Yeah.
So I think that also depends on your working day, because I class events as a working day as well.
True, that's true. Yeah.
So it depends what you want to get involved in. If you don't want to get involved in anything, then your day will look completely different to, for example, me and you, where we want to do different things, and we'll have Let's Chat Law meetings and stuff like that.
That's true.
So I think that also is dependent on how involved you guys want to get with the law.
Yeah, true. And also I realised I forgot to mention training, because obviously you do your bar course, you do your LPC or SQE, and the professional skills course, and then that's kind of done. But obviously being a lawyer, the law changes, obviously the case law changes and evolves, policy, government policy changes. So I think that's also something to factor in, is that there's a lot of training sometimes, and a lot of kind of, you still have to maintain your commercial awareness, quote unquote, throughout your job. Like it isn't, you can give up reading the FT or give up reading the news as soon as you've got your training contract or your pupillage offer.
Yeah, that's the same for barristers. That there's still an expectation that you continuously develop your practice and develop your skills and understanding, and that continuing development doesn't just stop once you get pupillage or tenancy. There is constant work to be done, which, you know, adds on to, again, a working day.
Yeah, so it's quite busy is a summary, definitely. I think. Yeah, hopefully that's a good overview of what barristers, the differences between barristers and solicitors, what we do on a day-to-day basis. Probably not the most concrete answer, but hopefully a good insight, and we'll hopefully be sharing more days in the life on our Instagram and social media pages soon.
So keep an eye out.
Yeah.
Welcome to our Not So Silly question segment. This was created in the same spirit of Let's Chat Law. The idea really was that we was going to answer questions from the Let's Chat Law community, so then you don't have to feel like you have to ask silly questions to professionals or people of, you know, seniority, and you feel like there's a safe space where you can ask these questions. So the silly question, or not so silly question today, is, are robots going to take our jobs as lawyers? Hannah, do you want to take this?
Yes, this is such a good question, and I feel like with the not the advent of ChatGPT, but with the buzz around ChatGPT last year, that really has got everyone talking. But I do think that the short answer is no. I don't think it's gonna take our jobs yet. I think that if lawyers and law firms and barristers are smart enough, we can use AI and, you know, kind of robots to kind of help us with our jobs and actually, like, hopefully make us more efficient and better at our jobs. But I don't think you can replace, you know, the human decision making and the kind of the human touch that you need with law firms. I think the best lawyers are the ones that, you know, obviously have the technical knowledge but can break it down to make it understandable for clients, and also, you know, can help understand maybe the client's business from a commercial solicitor's perspective. I think that you need the understanding of a client's business, and you need maybe that human touch of understanding and the commercial awareness of understanding what the client actually wants, you know, to get out of your advice. And I don't think that AI right now can do that job just yet. Maybe there'll come a time where they might be able to help us with that decision making, but at the moment I don't think you can just, you know, put an AI lawyer or like have a chatbot there and it will give the advice that maybe the client wants. So my answer is no.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with that. I think that it's unlikely, and if not impossible at the moment. I think advocacy in court is difficult to replace with robots. I think the need for the human touch and, you know, that human element when advising clients and also making submissions are necessary. I also think that, you know, AI and robots, because they don't have the emotions that, you know, us humans do. They don't really understand how to kind of make submissions on that sense. And, you know, like when you are in crime or family, there is such an emotional element into most cases. And I think people understand that and need to be able to use that and, you know, acknowledge it. Whereas robots obviously won't have that kind of opportunity to understand that and don't have the emotions. I think also there was talks about kind of robot judges in decision making, and I think also I don't necessarily think that's going to be plausible either. You know, judges apply the sentencing guidelines, but also apply the factors that relate to a defendant or a person. And their personal factors such as having children or, you know, work and things like that. And I think often if we did have robots as judges, they would just not take into account most things and actually think about the individual. They would just apply the law. And I think sometimes, you know, we don't need that in a community. We need them to be able to understand the whole circumstances and think about it realistically.
No, I agree. And I think the other thing to add is, I think if law firms are smart, as we said, you know, they can use these tools, AI tools, to kind of help with, you know, our our work and our day-to-day work. For example, like reviewing documents, you know, we can use like software that kind of analyzes like multiple document, like not multiple or millions, but maybe like a couple of hundred or thousand documents, which will obviously, if it would take a human so much longer to do. So that can be really like cost efficient. But I think, as we saw in the US, 2 US lawyers last year used ChatGPT to cite cases, and then they cited 6 fictitious cases, and now they've had to pay $5,000 to for acting in bad faith, which is quite embarrassing. And obviously they have the reputational damage as well of, you know, not just fact checking. So again, I think that's a prime example of like, you know, we can use AI as a tool to help us, but we still need, you know, the human lawyer to actually fact check and make sure things are correct, and as you say, like comes across well and like takes into account the individual circumstances of the case or, you know, the client.
Yeah, definitely. I think we need that as well, and we need that personal touch. And when we talked about earlier, building these relationships, you know, relationships and communication is key in this job. And I think, you know, a robot's just not got that opportunity to build them relationships and really understand the people. And law is about the people in general, you know, any kind of area involves a person, and it's relevant. Even business law, you know, it is people running this business. So I think we need people to be able to manage and assist and build relationships with clients.
Yeah, but I do think that law firms, I think the legal industry as a whole probably needs to innovate and adapt a bit more quickly. I think we're seeing, you know, certain law firms are like integrating like ChatGPT and other AI technologies into their companies and so on, which is great. But I think it needs to be a more wider take up. Otherwise, I think we are going to fall behind. And I also think a really interesting point is if we do start using AI to kind of help us with our jobs, especially for solicitors, we bill on time, right? So if we're going to become more efficient, you know, obviously we're cutting costs for the client, but also is that going to cut into law firms' profits and like how they run as a business? I think that'll be really interesting to see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I think it'll be useful to see kind of what law firms and chambers decide to do with this. Do you know, whether they do decide to accept the modern technology or whether they kind of get stuck in their old ways. And I think there will be positives and negatives to each side. And I guess, you know, we'll watch this space and we'll wait and see, won't we? Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. The next episode, which is episode number 4, is how do you start applying? So that's for legal jobs, legal work experience, that type of thing. And our silly question asked by the Let's Chat Law community is, should I request to connect with everyone I meet at networking events? Which me and Hannah May will be addressing at that point.
You can find Let's Chat Law on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and on our website where you can subscribe to our newsletter. We'd like to say thank you again for listening and goodbye. For this episode, we'd like to thank Betty Maxine Onwuteka, Elif Mutlu, Srinity Murugesan, and Josh Gawthorpe for their help with editing and producing this episode.